Ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to the Blockcrunch podcast, the go-to podcast for investors and builders in crypto. And before we get started, just a reminder for you guys out there, the Blockcrunch podcast is intended for informational purposes only. Neither the host nor its guests are licensed financial advisors, and nothing discussed should be construed as financial advice. Views held by Blockcrunch's guests are their own, and sponsorship messages do not constitute financial advice or endorsement. With that out of the way, let's jump right in. Today's episode is brought to you by Protocol Labs, the guys behind Filecoin. And with us today is Colin Efren from Filecoin, who can tell us a little bit more about what's one interesting way that people have used Filecoin to build. So Colin, take it away.
Yeah, Filecoin has been used to store hundreds of petabytes of Web2 data, helping Web3 cross the chasm into what I would argue mass adoption. Developers have built onboarding platforms like Singularity, Estuary, and FileDrive, and more to mimic S3 interfaces and onboard data sets like genocide testimonials from the Shoah Foundation, New York government public data sets, and large scientific data sets from universities like UC Berkeley. Within Web3, Filecoin has been able to provide redundancy for our top NFT platforms like Magic Eden, OpenSea, storing a large fraction of Web3's NFTs, and secure gaming assets through Unreal Engine 5.
Hello there. Now, before we move on, I'd love to thank the hundreds of you who have subscribed to Blockcrunch VIP, because with your support, I've been able to share my real thoughts on specific projects that I don't usually share on interviews in a format that I enjoy more, which is bi-weekly written posts. We've also been able to offer exclusive AMAs, sharing my investment frameworks, interactable models, and breaking down important trends before they become big. Now, we even had Elon Musk comment on one of our threads recently. So if you haven't already, head on over to theblockcrunch.com/VIP, and you can access dozens of hours of research for what you'd spend on a coffee a day. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Blockcrunch podcast. I'm back in my home studio again. Now this week, I'm going to talk about a project that I'm really excited about personally, and it's Ronin. Now Ronin is the EVM blockchain that was launched by Sky Mavis, which is the studio behind the hit game Axie Infinity, which I'm sure all of you here who's followed the show know about. And they recently had a massive revamp to their token model and announced partnerships with 5 exciting studios that are launching on Ronin as well. Now, many of you may remember the exploit that happened on Ronin last year, which we're not going to shy away from in this episode. So we're going to touch on that as well, touch on what happened since then, and how the team is preventing future issues as well. Now, just to give some context here, now Ronin as a chain has single-handedly facilitated over $4 billion in NFT sales. And it's actually the second best performing blockchain for NFTs behind only Ethereum based on its all-time metrics. So I'm really, really excited to see Ronin's comeback story since last year's events. Now, as a disclaimer, I personally do own some Ronin tokens, but this episode is not sponsored by Sky Mavis. So I'm really, really excited to have the co-founder of Sky Mavis, Aleksander Larsen, on the show to talk to us all things Ronin. So Alex, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Jason. Excited to be here. Big fan of the Blockcrunch, so excited to talk all things Ronin and, of course, everything else that we might want to touch on.
Yeah, but first, I know you just came back from GDC, as we were talking in the pre-show, and I checked that there's 28,000 people that went. And for our listeners, GDC is the Game Developers Conference. So what was new this year? Anything interesting this year?
Yeah, so GDC is always fun. I mean, some context here. In Sky Mavis, we've been building now for 5 years. We historically always try to go to GDC. It's been great. I think, especially over the past couple of years, we've seen progressively that Web3 is starting to get more attention. So we started seeing a lot of very big panels or very big, I guess, booths. So it definitely did not feel like a bear market. But usually what happens for GDC is that these big booths, they are being bought out, 6 to 8 months in advance. And then that really fits with when the bull market was still, at least, the prices were higher. So you can justify spending some money. But I think definitely some projects have spent millions of dollars to being diamond sponsors and that. So I would say there's a lot of excitement around Web3, and then people are really starting to understand that there are tangible benefits rather than just like the speculative benefits that has been the focus area so far. I mean, not shying away from that, it's definitely one of the superpowers of Web3, but I think at the end of the day, we need to show players that actually owning their digital items through games has meaning. And I think that's really one of the main benefits that has yet to be fully revealed.
Yeah, and even at the non-gaming conference that I went to, ETH Denver recently, I played with a game that was almost like feature parity with like early versions of Dark Souls, but all the items are NFT. So it's really crazy to see just how complex games have become, even like Web3 games. But I love to kick it off with obviously the elephant in the room that everybody's thinking about is I'm personally a huge fan of teams that come back from massive setbacks to not just survive but thrive. That's why I'm holding Ronin, and we're going to get to that part about thriving later on with the recent partnerships. But I do want to touch on the event last year, which was this $600 million exploit that happened on Ronin, one of the largest exploits in crypto history. So as looking back now, how did that happen? How did that get resolved? And what are you guys what are you guys doing to make sure that it won't happen again?
Sure. I mean, so right now it's been a year since that's happened. I'm proud to say that we refunded all the users, so nobody actually lost their funds except us, which is unfortunate. But I think we realized very quickly that user trust is really the key if we are ever going to bounce back here. So now, having said that, looking back into what had happened, I think it's just a general. Like, it's just one of the things that happen when you are scaling and growing very, very fast. You have to make some trade-offs. I think at the end of the day, the trade-offs that we made were unfortunately a little bit too aggressive. And then we really had to pay the piper there. So, but I'm very proud of how we handled it, and really just kind of getting down to business and solving the problems. As I was saying initially, we've been operating in this industry now for 5 years. We've seen a couple of very heavy bear markets. So it hasn't always been easy, and I think that grit is actually what what one of the biggest reasons why we managed to pull through such a critical time. So I'm very proud of my team, of course, for actually really staying focused, and then just kind of going down to business. Okay, how do we solve the problem? How did this happen? Can we actually be sure that this is not going to happen again before we reopen the bridge? And then really focusing on the security. I think turning Sky Mavis into a zero trust organization. And for those who are not too familiar with that wording, it basically means that you have to assume that anyone will get compromised at any time, and then really limit the amount of damage that one person can do. So that's really some of the steps that we took, and also of course adding Google as a validator. Really, I think, showcases just how much trust we have in this industry from some very, very big players. And of course, they wouldn't be a part of the network unless they actually believed in what we were doing. So there's a lot of stuff that happened there. We can really go deeper if we want to as well, but that kind of is the high level.
Yeah, and just to kind of clarify our listeners a little bit, I think the exploit that happened wasn't really a technical thing. It was more of a social exploit where I think like 5 validators were their information was breached and used to basically co-opt the funds. But right now you guys have changed the validator set, actually increased it to way more. If my recollection is correct, there's 22 validators right now.
Yeah, so we're now moving into delegated proof of stake for Ronin network. So I think last year we already increased it from 9, I think, to about 15 validators pretty fast after the breach. And then also further decentralizing the network, which is key. And now with this new setup, we have a split between governors and then also standard validators, which is a pretty new thing. So it's a split between delegated proof of stake and also proof of authority. But of course, those that do get slashed, they have a stake at place there. So yeah, excited to take this next step for Ronin and further decentralizing the network. So for example, Sky Mavis, we now only have one of the governing validators on Ronin network, and I think that really sets the tone for how we want this, how decentralized we want the network to be. I think we look at ourselves a little bit like the Ethereum Foundation in the sense that where we are setting the tone, we are suggesting different type of priorities, different type of upgrades. But we also expect that the standard validators and the governing validators to be a big part of defining the future of the network, especially as we are implementing different type of scaling solutions, and we see that how the network is going to evolve over time to be the ideal place for game developers.
Yeah, and I think this was such an important lesson for all of crypto as well, for decentralization to not just be an ideology, but for to serve an actual commercial purpose, because in this case, you really kind of divide up the security to many different entities versus if you exploit one entity, you can kind of exploit the bridge. That's not possible anymore. So that was really exciting to see. Was that always the plan, or how fast did it take for you guys to respond and kind of change the structure like that?
So we actually had a plan to decentralize the network over time. But when we were building a startup and things really you find product market fit, it's quite difficult to move fast in some areas. So I'm very happy that we're now taking this step. I think it's needed, and hopefully that the industry is learning from us as well, so that they don't have to go through some of the pain that we did. So overall, it's a great step moving forward for us, and I think that the validators that we have with us right now, they also understand the importance of security, and we're also working very closely with them to make sure that they're set up correctly.
Yeah, and I'd love to move on to talk about the exciting new partnerships. But before that, just a final closing thought on there. You guys were able to refund all of the users, so basically no users lost money. How was that possible? Because it was not a small sum of money at all.
Yeah. So going back 5 years, I remember we at one point very late 2018, we had 1 month left to live in terms of cash revenue, because we had made some mistakes in terms of treasury management. And then I remember saying, well, we're never going to run out of money again. So I made it my own mission in Sky Mavis. I'm the one who's raised all the money and kind of strategically focused on that we should have a lot of money. And over time, when we started seeing more and more success, we also raised a pretty significant round from A16Z, Paradigm, and also Excel. I think it was 150 million as a B round. And that really bolstered our balance sheet. We also had a significant portion in tokens that we also had been taking some gains from. So we had a very, very, very strong balance sheet, even from the beginning. And then also it really helped to get support from Binance and other big investors at such a crucial time to give some confidence to the market. And then, luckily for us, over time, the price didn't go up, at least. So I remember lying in bed, and then I was looking at the price for Ethereum. Like, I've been an Ethereum bull, I think, for 5 years now, and this is the first time that I was concerned because the price was going up. Because I went to bed and then I woke up, and then we owed another 5 million or something, and it was so brutal from like a mindset perspective. I was like, okay, we can handle a lot. We can try to solve the problems, but if it just keeps going up, it's going to become insurmountable in the end. So luckily for us, I think the price kind of stabilized from there, and that allowed us to give us more time, and then eventually we were able to refund all the users. So there's some numbers, like for example, I think we owed about 173,600 Ether. So I'm definitely never going to forget that number ever. I'm probably going to be, I don't know. We'll have to see if there's going to be some kind of memoirs one time in the future. But that's going through that together with my team definitely feels like we're more battle tested than most in the space. And just not giving up, I would say, is really the key learning here, right? So try to solve the problem one step at a time. And that's also what we hear a lot from the partners that we're having, is that they want to work with a partner who's seen the good stuff, which of course is crypto when you really kind of blow up, but also the bad stuff, because that means that you understand, I guess, the problem even more intimately.
Yeah, and one of the heuristics that I use as a personal investor is if there is something so existential that should have killed the project, but the project did not die, but they come back and they grew, not just come back and survive, but they came back and thrive, that's usually a signal that I want to get involved somehow. So that brings us a great segue to talking about the current new partnerships, because I think as of last week, since this recording, you guys mentioned that you have partnered with 5 new game studios. So these are Directive Games, Tribe Studio, Body Games, Bold, Skyvoo. So can you talk a little bit about, what was the criteria for finding these studios, and kind of what are they all kind of working on?
Over the past, I would say 12 to 18 months, we've been building out our BD arm at Sky Mavis. And because the thought was always that we would use basically every single tool, every piece of experience that we had, and give that to other teams that wanted to build similar type of games that us, that had a similar idea for how the market is going to be moving forward when it comes to Web3 games. And some of the things that we're looking for example, is that these guys are making mobile first games. Like we've always believed that the next hundreds of millions of players, they will come to the market through mobile. We've experienced it ourselves, how powerful this can be, especially in the Asian region. So when we looked at all these 250 type of game studios, we've talked a lot about them, or we talked a lot with them, and having a mobile first focus is really one of the very basic, I would say, demands. And then the rest is we have to have a solid team that has been shipping and executing great games. But one of the things that we realized, I think, is just how important it is to have good live operational experience. So when I say live ops, for example, in Web 2 gaming, live ops is all about, okay, you are acquiring a user, and then you have the user journey, and then that user churns, right? And your goal as a game developer is to extract as much value as you can from the user, and then they churn, and that's great. In Web3, live operations is something totally different, because you want to acquire users and you want to build a community with those users and not extract too much value immediately, but you can extract value over time. But the goal is to build 1,000 true fans, for example, at the start, and then keep building and creating IP. And that's always what we were doing with Axie. And I think that's why we're so excited to work with, for example, Directive Games. Because the founding team at Directive Games, some of them have, for example, worked at CCP. So that would be the team behind EVE Online. And EVE Online, I know Hilmar quite well personally. They've been doing live operations and building game economies for decades. That is very impressive, and that's something that we are looking for when it comes to our partners. Like, how do they look at game economies? Because from Axie perspective, we know how difficult it is to actually make a very solid game economy. So we have a lot of good faith when it comes to Directive, and of course, their game looks beautiful. We have a lot of Axie players who are looking to play a more action-packed game. So that really means that we can drive some users to them and like build that. It's not a golden cohort, it's like a diamond cohort. Because these are the people that are with you through thick and thin. And ideally, that's kind of one of the major benefits that we can provide to game studios when they're working with us.
Yeah, and we actually did speak to the Directive Games guys as part of diligence for this episode. And I thought what they were working on was really interesting. They have this arena-based game, but their token is to incentivize the community. So basically, if people create content, or they create, they moderate Discord, or maybe they host, esports tournaments, then they would get awarded tokens, which are then attested by group attesters, which I thought was such a genius model. It reminds me of when I first saw Play to Earn, but this is like the next step after that. And you mentioned kind of finding the first 1,000 users, which I thought was an interesting comment, because at the peak you guys had, I think, 2.8 million users every month, which was the most users any single application has had in crypto besides the exchanges. So I'm curious, like, what that experience has taught you guys about what it takes to onboard users. What are most, say DeFi applications not doing correctly? How come not everyone has like 2.8 million monthly active users?
It was actually daily at the top.
Daily. Oh, Jesus.
Yes. So that's pretty wild.
Boom.
And I think when you look back at that, the people that were playing the game, they were not necessarily only gamers, right? They were house moms, and they had a different type of motivation. And I think it really shows what's possible to do when you have like these crypto economies that somehow work. That can build momentum. Momentum is one of the most powerful forces in the universe, if not the most powerful force. So when you have momentum, that's when you get these very interesting things that happen. And when I'm looking at the history of Axie, it's always been this way in terms of a very cyclical nature. So we released very early stage in 2018, where we got, I think, the first core community of around 200 people. And then it actually contracted, right? So people started giving up. It is always this way. I think it contracted down to even 100 users. And then eventually, we just kept building. So it went up to about 1,000. And then they started learning a little bit more about the game and the ecosystem and the community. And then it contracted again, right? So, always cyclical, went back to 300 people, a lot of salty, behavior. But at the end of the day, that's really, when it contracts, that's when you find the true believers again. So after that, again, it really started growing and growing and growing. And then and then it happened over again until the last wave, where it was about 2.7 million people. And one of the problems that we find there is that it's hard from a game developer perspective to actually educate. And I think from a product perspective is to educate the new people that you get if it's growing so fast. So you get this group of people that might be, let's say, third order adopters of your product, and then they might see that product as something totally different that you, as the developer of the product, intended it to be. So I think it actually happened with Bitcoin and Ethereum and all of these other big cryptocurrencies, is where the people that are the biggest shillers, they're saying that this is something totally different, that this is kind of get rich quick scheme, or you just have to buy and then you're just going to go to the moon, right? They're not focused on really the fundamentals of the sovereign, of owning your money, right? For example, which is one of the real use cases of Bitcoin. And when you look at Ethereum, right? So what is it? It's a world computer that's sufficient, that's decentralized, that anyone can deploy programs on. I think these are some of the real benefits, but it really does get lost when the excitement around the price goes so high. And that's one of the main things that we learned at Axie too. It's very hard to control the narrative if you're not really paying close attention. So some of the things that we want to educate the game developers that we're working on right now is just how important it is to be present in the community on a daily basis as well, especially in the beginning, so that you can really educate the initial kind of diamond cohort as to your values as a game developer, and like what do you want to showcase to the new users, so that it doesn't get co-opted and turned into something bizarre and weird, which then again suddenly you have to be stuck defending for several years. I'm not saying that that's exactly what happened with Axie, because we definitely also leaned into the narrative to an extent. But it's definitely hard to justify, some people really taking up massive loans, for example, building scholarships, and yeah, I think that's some of the deep experiences that we've had.
And speaking of this diamond cohort, I want to go back to the 5 game studios that you guys partnered with, because I think that was really glossed over on Twitter when you announced it. Like, people just didn't understand who these are. These are not like small studios. These are folks that have been, creating games with like tens of millions of downloads. And I think what was interesting to me is that geographically, they also seem to cover a few different markets. So for instance, I think Bali Games is the maker behind Anipang, which is this like Korean mobile puzzle game. And they've made, if my number's correct, they've made like 1.8 billion in gross revenue. And then there's another Bolt, which is, a cricket focused game, which I think targets the India market. So how was it the deliberate choice to pick these studios that are in different geographies, or did it just so happen that the studios that are interested are coming from different places?
No, we were very deliberate in terms of the partners that we want to work with. So going a little bit deeper into Team Bali, we love them. That's a very specific case. They reached out to us because they love the Axie IP and they wanted to do something with us. And then we started to understand, who are these guys and is this actually a good fit? So the game that they're making is a match 3 game first with Axie IP, and then eventually they will be building another a totally new IP using the experiences that they've learned just by interacting with our community. So it's more of like this training session for them, and we're very excited about, first of all, the match 3 game, and also the next one when they are even more experienced. And that's also where we made an investment. So from a publishing perspective, we can also either make direct equity investments, token investments, we can do advances. We have a very broad mandate because we are investing from our own balance sheet, because we want to build out the ecosystem as a whole. So very excited about Team Bali and seeing like where does that lead us in the Korean market. And then we have this Bold team, which is something totally different again. They're more of a hyper casual kind of sports universe, building in the cricket universe first. And cricket is I think one of the biggest, it is the biggest sport in India. And India has one of the absolute youngest populations in the entire world. So what I'm excited about there is seeing if we can make a little bit of a similar, growth experiment as what we saw with Axie, right? So with Axie, it all started spreading from one place called Cabanatuan City, a very small suburb not suburb, but small part of the Philippines. And I think if we can do something similar there with Bold, you can actually, turn this into a cultural phenomenon. So when we look at what happened in the Philippines, for example, people at one point, they started paying for food with small love potions in their shops. So people on the street were accepting smooth love potion as payment. And I think that is the future of some of these games, because these in-game economies will somehow have more meaning than the real economies where people are spending their time. So I'm very excited about Bold and seeing if that can have a very big cultural significance. and especially even unbanking banking the unbanked, potentially even in India, because that's actually what crypto does. They're going to get unbanked, even if they're going to get banked, even if they don't know what's happening, right? So a crypto wallet is basically just like a bank. So very excited about Bold. And then we have Skyroo, which are building the Battle Bears game. I think it's had over 40 million downloads so far, and we're adding Web3 to that over time, and also upgrading the quality of that game. So very excited to work with those guys. Lastly, let's not forget the Tribes team, which has worked on some of the most biggest games in the world, such as Candy Crush. Worked at King. The founder there is exceptional when it comes to community building. So they're doing a very, very different approach. They're building an MMO, and they're actually trying to use the community to co-design parts of the game. So I'm excited to see where that leads as well. And the thing is, with this strategy, what we're trying to do is we're trying to see what is actually the perfect fit for blockchain tech, right? And where do we need to double down for the next cohort of games? So rather than I think bringing in hundreds of different type of games, which is what you see historically from many type of blockchains, we have these 5 now, which we want to focus on. We want to teach them. We want to go to market with them, and we also want to learn so that we can see, okay, this is exactly what we are looking for, where we think we can find product market fit, and then do a very kind of systematic, create a framework for this. And then really, copy that for many, many different type of games. So very tailored strategy, I think curated, and that really is kind of going back to some of the learnings that we had with Axie. Is you really can't try to do a spray and pray approach. You need to focus on, you need to double down, and that's really the only way to build the high quality products.
And speaking of high quality products, there's been so many big promises from games in Web3, and eventually they take so much time to build. And even with AAA titles in non-Web3, these games take like 5-10 years to build. So what is the timeline for these studios to start shipping on Ronin? Are we talking about years from now we can finally play these games, months, weeks? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, so for the Machines Arena, for example, it can be played today. It's in early access, or I think a beta. And what we're going to be working on there is trying to see how does it look like when they're implementing NFT type of economy, for example. Which kind of items should be turned into NFTs first? So that one is a unique one because it is available today. And then the rest of them should have a pretty fast go to market. I think we're going to be talking about it within a year for some of these games. Because of course they're building on mobile. So what we want is quick iterative cycles so that they can actually ship something, get data back from the market, and then eventually we can move forward and see what should we be doubling down on, right? So iterative approach to building products. And I think that's also very, very needed in the space right now. And that's also why we were never really focused on these very big AAA type of PC games. I think that's maybe one thing that maybe crypto Twitter is particularly interested in, right? So they might look at some of the games, such as the Bold team, or let's say the Max 3 game, and they're like, oh, what is this? This is not a game for me. Well, no shit. It's not made for you. We're not focusing on you, the crypto Twitter market. We really need to get hundreds of millions of people from outside of crypto to come into this. And I think the ideal approach here for the people that are looking at it from an investment point of view is, what kind of exposure do you want? If you really think that you want to have exposure to the type of game that you want to play, well, there are many different things that you can buy. But if you want exposure to a lot of type of mobile games, and you believe that maybe that's where the hundreds of millions of players will come into the market first, and probably Ronin is not such a bad bet.
And I'm curious about the market selection. I'm sure you guys done a lot of research in terms of which market to go after, because it seems like with both Axie Infinity and with these partners that you're partnering up with, a lot of the focus is on Asia. So what is the difference between Asia's gaming market or Asia's Web3 market versus the US or Europe?
Yeah, I think it's a good observation, and definitely true that we're focusing a lot on Asia for now. The reason is simple. I think that the Asian cultures, they right now are more excited about Web3, and it's easier for them to take the leap, especially because a lot of them they don't even have gaming PCs. They have mobile phones. So our strategy being mobile phone focused right now also makes it easier for them to download some of these games, and because some of them they even skipped the entire PC era. They went directly from nothing to mobile phones, and then playing all their games through there. And I think it's going to be easier for us also to showcase the benefits to Asian cultures, mostly because actually also in the West, there's a lot of stigma around Web3. And there's I think the woke culture sometimes even goes too far where they want to attack something just to do it. And they don't have I think, clarity to actually experiment with the stuff and try to see the benefits. And I think it's hard to understate that, because people are just attacking for no reason, and they don't really understand. I think somehow it's the biggest, most successful lie from Web2 publishers is that they managed to rally the community against blockchain and crypto when actually it should be a net benefit. Imagine like having a feature parity, two type of games that are of equal quality, and in one game you can actually own your digital property through Web3. And then, what would you choose? To me, it's an obvious answer, but somehow the narrative is, oh no, this is some bad stuff. We should like trust these Web2 game studios that have been squeezing us for money for decades. It's absurd. So that's why I think it's going to grow over time, and it's easier to grow fast in Asia, and then eventually the Western audience will see the benefits.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that if I remember correctly, that was the reason why Vitalik started Ethereum. I remember on his personal website, he mentioned that he was playing World of Warcraft. He geared up, and then his loot or his skin got deleted or something, and he was like, "No, we need something immutable." So that was one of the driving forces behind Ethereum, which I think we've come full circle here. I'd love to kind of talk about the specific partnerships as well. So what does it mean for a studio to partner with Ronin? Like, are you guys paying them RON tokens? Are they paying you to work for them? Like, how does a typical partnership work?
Yeah, so we can be very flexible. I think it really depends on what does the game studio need. But the most interesting thing is I think everyone is looking for a little bit of funding, so we can invest directly in equity. We can invest sometimes in tokens. And then there's a revenue share, usually because we have our own marketplace, the Mavis marketplace, which is going to be launched very soon. It's a generalized NFT marketplace with a unified order book, similar to what you would find on other chains. I think the unique thing here is that since Ronin Network is permissioned for now, we can actually guarantee that there are royalties for these game developers, something that we find is that they are very, very excited about. So I think that's one of the more interesting things. And we can also do minor grants. Really depends on, but what we do is, we try to structure those so that they're tied to milestones in terms of value add to the network itself. So that, let's say if they bring in, let's say 100 millions of wallets or something, then it would unlock a little bit of a bigger grant. I think that's, generally speaking, how you how you make a good business deal. That's where you align the incentives between both parties. So working with us, I think very specifically is that we go quite detailed into the game. We have our own group of people, our own, as you would want to call it, an operating platform, which is not a physical platform, but more in a sense that, okay, working with you, we try to see what does a good go-to-market look like? How does your token economy? Where do you need help to build community? These kind of things. And then really more tactically, we help out on the go-to-market. So for those who are interested, they can check, for example, the Directive team on Twitter, and then they can see just exactly how much our, for example, the Axie community creators were helping out. So I think we have over 2,500 unique creators that are part of our creator program that we can actually showcase these early games to, and then onboard the players too, so to kind of build that diamond cohort. So that's kind of more on the go-to-market, which I think a lot of game studios are very excited about. I just came back from Japan, and I think a lot of these Japanese bigger publishers, that's really one of the bigger problems that they see in the market is that there's a lot of promises to go to market, but it's very difficult to build that first cohort of users that are actually real players. So selling NFTs is not difficult, but getting real players to care about your game and to build that, like I would say, the social fabric around the game, which then again builds a strong IP. That's really where the difficulties are. Of course, we also have very specific, I think, tactical advantages from a technical point of view. And here I'm not talking about commoditized infrastructure in terms of like a blockchain, for example, because to me that is actually a commodity. I mean, actually specifically, well, the wallet, for example, that has now social login. And then that means that people can create their wallets. We're using Web3 all for that. They don't need any sort of private key. That's great. and then they can just onboard and then pay for free. And when, for example, the developer or the player reaches level 10 or something like that, they can get a free transaction on Ronin, which is something very new that no one actually has, which is called a transaction pass. What happens there is imagine you get level 10 inside a game, and then the developer is giving you something called a transaction pass, and you also at the same time you get this one NFT. So when you want to list that NFT on the marketplace, the transaction pass is going to call a smart contract, and in that smart contract there is RON tokens, which is going to again get shipped to the transaction pass, and then that's going to actually use the or to list the token on the marketplace. So the user doesn't even see that there is any sort of token or any sort of gas fee required, and the smart contract can be filled up by either Sky Mavis or the game studio. So all of these, like, I think, small things that really add up and make it so that the user experience should be very, very seamless. And I'm very excited to especially integrate the transaction pass in Axie first, and then also eventually allowing that for other users.
Yeah, and I think in a moment we're going to talk about how Ronin differs from other, existing gaming-focused offerings out there. But just to wrap up this part on kind of the internal BD efforts, I've heard that some of the best founders are the best capital allocators as well. And given the size that you guys are at now and the many initiatives going on, I'm curious how you guys allocate resources, be it capital or human resources. Like, how do you split between the Axie game itself, the Ronin chain itself, or focusing on these third parties who are building games on top of Ronin?
The Axie Infinity community is definitely the beating heart of Ronin. I think it's still going to be that. So we have allocated a significant amount of our internal resources for that. Sky Mavis is now 250 people in total. So I would say the majority of that is still working on more common-sized infrastructure. And then we have a specific part that's working specifically on Axie, and then also the BD team and the growth team, which is about 25 people in total, where we are focusing on many, many different initiatives. I think the point is here, we're trying to utilize all the experience that we have from Axie so that we can create frameworks for other teams so that we don't have to do all the work again. And the same also goes for those studios. In terms of capital, I think it's a great question, and I frequently see it being kind of publicized in the media that our chain, we've invested so much money in the blockchain gaming space, and I'm like, well, great, you bought the top. That's really what I feel like, because there's been so much money allocated to blockchain games at such insane valuations, and I think it's a problem because what does a good valuation look like for a game studio at seed at Series A stage? Like, it shouldn't be 500 million. To me, that's crazy, and we still see some of those remnants coming or still being stuck from the market. And I think it's going to be very, very difficult for some of these teams to even survive, because they might have sold tokens at such a very, very high valuation and have unrealistic expectations from the market. I think what they will find when they work with us is realistic valuations, and then hopefully also that these teams are very hungry to succeed because there's a lot of excitement around it, and they haven't actually been given a payday before they've succeeded. I feel like that's such a massive problem with the current space. And if you get the money up front, how do you survive when times get tough, right? You really need to have that internal conviction about Web3. And that's pretty difficult from a game studio perspective, because a lot of these game studios, they don't have the same, I think, deep understanding of, the benefits, right? They might be slightly opportunistic, and I think that's okay. But, then you shouldn't be giving a lot of money up front that ways. You need to build that conviction internally over time.
Yeah, I think that's a common problem with crypto projects is, teams get rich before the products get built. But that's mostly of a bull market problem, which now seems to have mostly starting to resolve itself now.
I hope so.
And I in crypto, yeah. And I'd love to kind of use this opportunity to talk about the competitors as well, because there's so many new offerings out there now. I think most recently Arbitrum with Treasure DAO has been doing quite well. And then, Immutable also announced something with Polygon, which we've covered for our VIPs. So there's a lot of stuff happening for infrastructure, for gaming specifically. So how does Ronin differentiate itself over time?
Yeah, I think I touched on it briefly, right? So what is actually the net benefit to working with someone like us? I think really it is the experience that we have from actually shipping stuff in the market. So I think everyone is trying to say that, oh, we can do all this stuff, we've succeeded, or we have all the tools that you need. But in reality, nobody has actually shipped the product to millions of people at scale. And I think that's really the biggest difference that we have, because we know what it takes to succeed. And we can actually show these people that, this is what they should be doing. And then, of course, we're building tools and services that are uniquely tailored to that, so that when they actually come to those problems or they need to cross the chasm, that's when we got their back already. So I think that's really the major difference. And of course, that we actually have this social fabric on Ronin and in terms of the Axie community, which is undisputed as being, I think, the most active blockchain game community of all time, and actually showing people that these are real players. It's not only speculators. So as I was saying, like finding speculators, finding traders, it's not necessarily hard. Like it's the same, let's say 2,000 people on crypto Twitter that are like aggressively shilling their own bags. That's great. And what it seems, it makes it look like it's very active, but in reality, there are not that many real people that are playing these games that love these games. And I think that's really the big difference that we have, is that we can actually bring them real players, and of course also speculators, because there's a lot of we have different type of people in the community, and some people got very, very rich just based on the AXS token, the RON token. So I think we pretty much have a very solid package there for game developers. And then, of course, as I was saying, some of the tools that are very unique to us. And here's something that we are developing, which I definitely we're getting a lot of good feedback from. And the point for Sky Mavis is we are owning the complete stack, right? So we have the blockchain, we have the Mavis Hub, which is the distribution channel, and then we also have the wallet where the players that's where they first get started. So what we are doing is we are partnering with game studios, and we're saying, like, if you are bringing in, let's say, 1 million users through your game, we're going to attribute that user to your account. So we're tagging that user. And whenever that user is spending money on the wallet, that's actually when we, Sky Mavis, make money. So it's similar to the way that MetaMask makes money. When people click swap in MetaMask, MetaMask makes a cut. When people will click swap in Ronin, that's when Sky Mavis will take a cut. And in that moment, when we take our cut, we're going to give, let's say, 1 or 2% back to the game developer in the next 5 or 10 years. And imagine how incredibly sexy that is from a game developer perspective, because it's almost like you're owning a part of the App Store. Imagine if you could do the same thing back in the day, if you brought in, let's say, 10 million users to the app stores through your game. And then whenever those people were spending money in something else, you would also get a cut of that. I think it's very unique. I haven't really heard of anyone else doing it. So very excited to ship that feature either in Q2 or Q3 this year.
Yeah, I think that's massive, right? That's the whole idea about, like, what if we had Uber, where the early drivers who created the network actually gets paid partly in Uber equity early days, they would all be massively rich. I think that's pretty powerful economic incentives that games should be exploring. And speaking of the token itself, you guys just announced that Ron will enable staking. So can you explain exactly what's happening there? Why is staking necessary?
Yeah, sure. So staking, I think you probably have a lot of educated people who are listening to the podcast, but we need staking on Ronin network so that the users can help ensure the security of the network. I think that's generally the most important thing, is that you can delegate your tokens to a certain validator, and then that validator is a part of the block producers on the network. And I think that really is as easy as it is. And then, of course, you get rewards. You get rewards based on if you're delegating to a validator that is then one of the block producers.
That makes a lot of sense. And we also noticed that for Ron, there's a lot of tokens unlocked in the treasury that are not being used right now. So what are the short-term plans for the usage?
Yeah, so we have an ecosystem fund, for example, about 150 million tokens. Not many of them have been spent. I think we might announce some light fund there when it comes to supporting different type of game developers or some part of for operations. But the thing here is, Sky Mavis owns a significant amount of RON tokens, and we are covering our own operations from our own balance sheet. So I would say that we're a little bit different there in terms of many foundations, for example. But yeah, for the tokens of the ecosystem fund, they are there to support the building of the network and supporting different type of studios as they are onboarded.
That makes a lot of sense. And we don't want to, touch on the token too much because we mostly focus on the product side of things here. So I'd like to kind of wrap it up by coming back to the high level, which is the state of gaming in crypto right now. Because I think in 2021, gaming really entered its stride, and every single VC that I know was putting the entire fund into crypto games. And now it seems like the fervor has fallen off a bit. A lot of attention shifted to AI. You personally, what are you excited for gaming? Not just for Ronin or Sky Mavis, but for crypto gaming in general for this year.
Sure. So I think a little bit of background of me. I used to be a competitive gamer. I always loved Warcraft 3, Dota 2. Represented Norway, and in Warcraft 3, for example. Yeah, I mean, I love the RTS type of games. The point is that's maybe 15 years ago, and when we beat Sweden, Norway and Sweden, there's like a lot of rivalry there, so it has a lot of meaning to me when we beat Sweden. But I don't have any sort of proof to show people that I actually did that, and I think I wish that I had some kind of NFT in my wallet that would prove that I actually represented Norway, that I'm doing all these things. Like, that's my digital self. I believe very heavily in digital identity, and I think that over time, as people are achieving things inside various different type of blockchain games, that they should have some kind of proof, right? As a similar to achievements, but that these achievements should be owned by them in their wallet in case these games go down, and then eventually, these will come to be your digital identity. And it's not about money in that sense. To me, it's about emotion and connection. And I think that's what I'm very excited about for blockchain games, is that these games can build a tighter relationship with their players, with their communities, because it's more real. I think the way I like to describe crypto and what it enables is like, this is a new expansion pack to the internet that we have been waiting for, that when it's now enabled, there's no real way of going back. It's just richer and it's more powerful, and it means that internet has more meaning than it ever had before. And the NFTs are about culture, and gaming is culture to me. And I think we'll see more and more game studios experimenting with this and really adding NFTs in sorts of all interesting games. Not only adding them because it is about money, right? Money is important, but at the end of the day, the culture is also what matters, I think, in these games, and why NFTs are meaningful. Which is why I have very strong opinions, for example, on this Blur versus OpenSea case, where Blur is really leaning so much into making NFTs only like shitcoins, and on the hyper financialization of NFTs. To me, that's not attractive at all. I think from a trader perspective, it's great, but you're really missing out on why do people care more about this than just some kind of shitcoin, right? Which they can just dump. I think having NFTs in your wallet and having the ability to sell those has meaning, even if you are not selling them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think you encapsulated it incredibly well. And I'm really, really excited for gaming. I do think this is, ever since we started kind of Tangent, one of our focus is on finding use cases that bring more people into crypto, not just, investing in things that I as a crypto native would love to use, but like the next 10, 20, 30 million people will use. So I'm incredibly excited to see what you guys are up to. And thank you so much once again for coming on the show. And Alex, for people who want to follow you, Ronin, Sky Mavis, Axie Infinity, what are the best channels for them to do this?
Yeah, definitely. We use Twitter a lot. So my tag is at psychout86. For now, still verified. I guess we'll see what happens in the next couple of days. Other than that, Ronin _network or Sky Mavis HQ on Twitter as well. And then Axie Infinity, I think you can find that pretty easily. So yeah, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be here. Hopefully we'll have a chance to do it in a couple of years when we see that the Ronin network is a massive success, or even bigger than it is today, and that more than 100 million people are playing blockchain games.
All right, that's it for this week's episode of the Blockcrunch podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe on your favorite apps. And in case you didn't know, this interview is also available as a video on YouTube. And if you tag the Blockcrunch on Twitter this week and tell us what you liked about this episode, I'll be sure to respond to you as well. Now, if you'd like to go even deeper, we have a VIP tier where every week or so, we write an in-depth research brief or investment memo on a project. And we'll have exclusive AMAs with myself where I answer all your questions as well. Now, we already have analysts from some of the top funds and companies in crypto as subscribers. So if you're serious about getting an edge in crypto, head on over to theblockcrunch.com/VIP to learn more. And once again, thanks for supporting the show, and I'll see you next week.